At Sea Crane, we love radio, so we thought what better way to share that with you than to find some of the most interesting people in radio, talk to them, let them share their insights and experiences with you so you can get to know the person behind the mic. So I'm here with Rich Valdés with an S. Rich is the host of the nationally syndicated late night radio show, America at Night. For those unfamiliar with Rich's show, it's new talk radio for a new generation. He brings late night radio alive with a blend of news, entertainment, interesting interviews, pop culture, and insight. It's described as America's new nighttime town hall. He talks with politicians, influencers, entertainers, and ordinary Americans from all walks of life. And then it's Open Phone America, where you can call in and have a turn to chime in on the discussion with your own thoughts and ideas. So thank you, Rich, for joining me today.
Oh,
We're
it's my
super
pleasure.
excited to have you here. And I wanted to start with asking you 3 questions that I ask everyone. So, what book are you currently reading, or what book has had the biggest impact on you?
Yeah, definitely the Bible. It's the one I don't put down. I started reading Psalms and Proverbs when I was like 19. And, I have my moments where I don't read it and it gets dusty and I have to get back to it. But that's what I'm in as of late, reading Galatians. And it doesn't get old. I think at different points in your life, you go back to a lot of the ancient scripture and you're at a different place in life and they mean different things when you're rereading. I mean, the words are the same, right? And they have the same
Right.
meaning, but your interpretation, because of your wisdom, your maturity level, etc., gives you a different level of enlightenment, if you will. And I think you just can't go wrong with that. That's my go-to.
Yeah, I love that. What got you into the Bible?
I would say I was trying to pick up girls, and the when I was like 19 and 18, I had a neighbor. She was the plug, as I called her. She was a friend of mine, really cute, but she had a lot of really pretty friends. And one day she was like, "Oh, you should come to this thing we're doing tomorrow." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah. Where are your friends going?" And she was like, "There's a lot of girls." And I was like, "Oh, I'm in. What time?" And she was like, 10 o'clock. I was like, "It's a little late." And she's like, "No, it's 10 in the morning." And I was like, 10 in the morning on a Sunday? Where would we go? What are you going to church? And she was like, "Yeah, something like that." So she picked me up. We went, and I was like, "We're really going to church?" And it made a big difference. I went in there very skeptical. I mean, my mom raised me Catholic, and I have, of course, have faith, but it wasn't a thing for me. And at that age, I was into my barber business, and I went, and it was life changing for me. It really was. I heard a message that I was very skeptical about. I went in there saying a lot of these preachers they're like televangelists. They just want your money. And
Right.
the preaching was on giving 10% of your income in the form of a tithe to the church, and out of the book of Malachi. And it was just remarkable to me. I said, I can't believe these people are going to preach about this today, of all days that, I said that. But it got me. Holy Ghost got me. I was enthralled by the message. I was really interested in the challenge that was presented by the preacher of testing God. Being one of the few only area that I know of in the Bible where it says to challenge God on the giving of gifts like that. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try this. I did it out of defiance, though, out of pride. I think I had $100 in my pocket. And I said, let's see if this comes back tenfold, like this guy's saying. And to the penny, that following week, $1,000 came my way. And I was like, happenstance. I'm going again. And I went again and I did it again and it happened again. And I was like, I don't think it's happenstance. I think this is serious and this is better than Atlantic City. This is better than Vegas. You're guaranteed to win if you put your money into God. So I went and I just kept going. And before too long, I realized, life's a lot better when you have Jesus in your life and you play by the rules. And I hate to say by the rules because it's not really about rules. I think it's about having that relationship and that type of liberty that you get when you really get into it and feel that you're really, I guess, living the way you're supposed to live once
Mhm.
you've gotten to that level. And it keeps going, right? I feel like I'm learning something new every day. It's like salvation all over again every Sunday, and every time I crack open the Bible, I'm feel like Paul when he says, "I too am a sinner, the biggest amongst y'all." That's me most days. But that's kind of what it was for me.
I love that. Where is your favorite place to visit or travel to and
Hmm.
why?
This is a tie. It's a tie between Southern Florida, I would say probably Miami Beach or Brickell, and Puerto Rico. I love Puerto Rico. I think both of them. I like the weather in both places. I love the vibe in Miami. I love the culture in Puerto Rico, and there's something about north of 80 degrees that really just does it for me. You know, I like to feel my skin sizzling from the sun, and I believe people are happier when they're by the beach, when they're just, that's for me how God intended. So
I agree.
those are my spots.
Do you have a daily practice or a morning routine to set you up for success each day?
I don't know. I think I'm a little bit of a pessimist, believe it or not. I don't know that I have success every day, but yeah, the routine is, I check my Bible app. I look at the verse of the day. I try to share it with some people, and I try to frame the outlook of the day that way. Do some prayer, and then I hit the gym with my buddies. I have something that I've learned is very unique that a lot of people don't have. In my travels, I found that everybody that I hang out with every day, and I hang out with two guys that I've known since I was a teenager, and we've been friends all these years. And I have a pretty decent sized friend group of about 6 or 7, maybe even 10 people that they've all been my friends for 30 plus years, like since we were little kids. And uh, that's my norm. And it is for all of us. But whenever I tell people that, they're like, get out of here. You have, 6 best friends that are from, I do. And so yeah, I go to the gym with a couple of my buddies. One of them was a bodybuilder, and he's not anymore, but he's the trainer. And then everybody else is, like me, trying to catch up. So, we hit the gym, we do some circuit training, we do some weights. Lately, it's weights, trying to get a little bit going before we try to lose all the fat for summer. And that's the routine. Then we go and eat, try to, stay carb free and do a lot of protein. And because it's easy to get fat, right? I was fat. I was almost 300 pounds, and I lost a lot of weight doing keto and doing whatever. The doctor told me I was going to be dead. He said, you'll be dead by 50 if you don't lose weight. So I had to change things in 2017, and I've been progressively losing weight. And I think I'm stuck here at 190 pounds or so. And I don't need to get any lighter. I just need to look better. Need to, get more muscles and feel better and become more fit. And so it's a definitely a journey. That part I've learned. It's not a
It is
it's not a like
not linear.
a goal, right? Yeah. Like, I'm going towards probably about a year that we've been pretty consistent, 3 days a week. And my New Year's resolution this year was to go 5 days a week, and I haven't done it yet. We're in March, and I haven't done it yet. But I'm in my 40s now. I'm like, it's about the guilt-free life. I'm not going to beat myself up because I didn't get to the gym 5 days a week. And today I had a tres leches cake, which is absolutely fantastic. And I normally don't, but I did. And I was like, I'm not going to cry about this either. I'm just going to do it. And, if I have to wear a size large shirt for the next week because I gained a few pounds, I'll do that. And I'll go back to my mediums. And, I'm just learning the key is to be consistent. And that's how things worked for me in radio. My mentors, each of them taught me something different. John Batchelor was a mentor of mine who taught me about companionship. He said, you have to become companions with the listener. When you treat it that way, they'll stay with you longer. Radio typically is a 15-minute listen. They listen in the car and they get out, but it depends on what time of day you're on. And I started my radio career doing weekends and in the afternoon, and then weekdays, middays. So that's 10 to noon. And it was cool, but those people are usually at their job. They're at their desk listening. They're, some people in the car, but not most, because it's not a commuting time. And when my switch to nighttime radio, those people are either on the road all the time, truckers, cab drivers, ambulance cops, those people, or they're at work at night and warehouse, things like that. And I learned from Bachelor that they will likely stick around for the majority of your show as long as you treat them like I'm here to hang out with you. So I've always remembered the companionship aspect from him. Mark Levin taught me to always be myself, that if you, and it sounds so simple, so rudimentary, but he's the only person that really made it make sense for me, and he used himself as an example. And he said, I'll do my Levin impression. He said, Richie, everybody's trying to be like Rush. Everybody's trying to be like me. Nobody can be a better you than you. So just be you. And it hit me because I knew exactly what he meant. Limbaugh had influenced so many people, and there's still people on the radio today. You can
Yeah.
hear the Limbaugh influence in them, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it was him telling me that nobody could copy me better than I could be me for real. And I thought that is golden. I can't mess up if I'm just me. So it worked really well for me. And Curtis Leewood taught me about consistency, and about just keep showing up. And he literally told me, just keep, literally the words he used were, he said, just keep talking, just keep talking. That's all he would tell me. He said, if the lights go out in the studio, your mic still may be hot. So just keep talking. You don't know if you can't go to the break. He said, if your board operator keels over and drops dead, God forbid, keep talking. And that taught me something. So I realized consistency. And my dad was a very consistent guy. He was never the type to give up. He wasn't a quitter in any way. And my mom. And so, you look at those examples, and I realized, radio is tough to get into. It was tough to succeed. But you just keep trying. And, it all, for me, it was all depending on there were no crappy deals because I wanted to do this. Right. But there were times I slept on a cold studio floor because the shifts were too close together and there was no buses in and out of the city. And I live in Jersey. So that was, not cool. It was cold. They turn off the heat at night in a lot of New York buildings. So it was cold. But I was like, what an adventure. I'd wrap myself in my jacket, get a couple of Z's and, do the morning show right after doing the late night show as a substitute because those weren't my shows. And, I was happy to be on the air.
Mm-hmm.
And I always looked at it like, this is great. And some people who are more established would look at me like, man, you're crazy working all those shifts. And I was like, I'd be crazy not to. I came from a very poor place in life. Poverty was all over where I was born. Everybody was poor. We grew up very poor. So this was, for me, it was a piece of cake. I was like, you want me to sleep on the floor in the cold, a couple of rats? I could deal with that. No biggie.
Oh my goodness. That's dedication. That's like perfecting your craft,
Yeah, well, John Batcher, back to him though. He told me, he said, you're never going to be an expert at this until you've done it for 10,000 hours. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of hours. So, and I realize every day, and like in anything, right? You might work out and bodybuild, and people will look at you and go, wow, Jessica, you look fantastic. And you look in the same mirror and you're like, really, that's funny because I thought it was a flabby over here. I could really develop these muscles more. This muscle is bigger than that one, and we are our own worst critic. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that that's what everybody else is seeing. So I do a show every day, and there's days I go, man, I nailed it. What a great show. But they're few. Most days I go, I made it through. Wasn't the best I've done, but we're going to do it again tomorrow. We're going to strive for better. But that's really what keeps you going is that trial and error and perfecting the craft, as you say. That's really it. And some people see it, others don't. But I know what I see, and I know what I hear, and I know what I do. So I just make sure I try to make today's show better than yesterday's, and it doesn't always work. And I had a program director who's the boss in radio once told me that he said, you're not going to knock it out of the park every day. And I was so offended. And I was like, how could you say that? I'll never strive for mediocrity. Like I was really offended by what he said. And it took me years to learn and internalize that message, which was, it wasn't a critique. He wasn't trying to offend me. He was just telling me, you just keep going. Just keep going. You may not nail it today, and you don't quit. You don't look for a new job. You just do a good show tomorrow, and let's keep it moving.
Like plus you get kids and coaching, like
exactly
first base, right? Like just a base hit,
right?
That's what you're doing. Like not always. You might get a home run, but trying to get a base hit.
Yeah, just don't quit. 100%. And that wasn't something that came naturally for me. That's something I've had to kind of learn to develop, to that kind of grace for oneself, because we can be very hard on ourselves, especially when it's something finite. I don't know too many people that even want to get in radio, but those who try know it's hard. and there's not a lot of help wanted signs for radio host wanted, right? It's a tough industry to crack into. So it's like you're in it and there's pressure. And that you create for yourself, right? Because radio is the chillest, but you think everybody's a stoner in this business. Everybody is so chill. Really, they are. I put the pressure because I'm just like, any day somebody could be, trying to get in. And I guess that keeps you sharp, but you do have to learn to have that grace for yourself.
So take me back to the you before radio. What were you doing?
Sure. Yeah. So right before radio, I was burying my dad. And shortly before that, my mom. And that was kind of what prompted this whole thing. I'd worked in government for Governor Chris Christie in the New Jersey state government, and had worked in higher ed for some years. And that was what I did, marketing, and did some of the radio ads for the college that I worked for. And then I went to work in government based on some of the connections I made there. And it was great. It was cool. It was work. It was administrative work, political work. And my mom became ill and she died. And she made this deathbed promise, made me make a promise to her saying, please take care of your father. And I was like, oh, it was just an interesting chain of events. I was married, and my wife and I were getting divorced. But this decision came like on a Tuesday. And on Wednesday, my mom called me and said, do you think you could sleep on the couch in my house? And I said, why? And she said, because I need help going to the bathroom at night because I'm not feeling good. And I was like, I'm going through so much right now to not be in my house. Maybe it's a good thing, but probably isn't. But I did it. And I stayed here until she got progressively more ill, and then she went to be with the Lord, and that was a wrap. And then she tells me, take care of your father. So now I have to move in here. Now I'm divorced, and it eventually worked out. I had gotten an apartment, and I was traveling from the apartment to take care of my dad, to go visit my kids, to, trying to adjust to this new life, balancing my work and in the state government. And it was a lot. And I eventually finished my work in the state government, went back into the private sector, working for this college. I was working for Somerset Christian College at the time, and they needed more of me than I could give at the time. And I remember the guy who was in charge of the department I was in telling me, we need you to be here. And I was thinking, I was like, my dad needs me. I need to take some time off. I don't know what we're going to do, how we're going to work it out, but we have to figure it out. And eventually it didn't work. So we had to part ways, and we did. And that was bittersweet, but it was what it was. And I eventually just stayed with my dad because I couldn't have a full-time job and be here with him. And he was very difficult. He was a very tough guy. He didn't want any home health aid. He didn't want anything. He took him to a home to see how he would gel there. There was no gelling. I went to 4 homes. He got kicked out of 4 homes. He was a real handful. They were like, did he used to be a boxer? He's always fighting. I was like, huh. He did whatever he wanted. He was a bad kid, like a bad kid in kindergarten. That was my dad. So I was like, all right, it's me and you, old man. So, I stayed with him. And that lasted, I stayed with my dad for 7 years, but I worked. It was the last 2 years where I really took like 18 months off from work to be with him full time, because his health had declined a lot and we were doctors all over the place. And eventually he had a big stroke, and he died and went to be with the Lord. And I was like, oh boy, what do I do? And I was with one of my several childhood friends that are always around. And I was like, what do you think I should do? Like, go back into government or go back into marketing and higher ed? I don't know what to do. And he tells me, you love talk radio. You're always arguing with the radio. Why don't you get into radio? And I was like, ha ha ha. That's like telling me you like watching football. Go work in the NFL. Again, it just, how do you do it? I had no idea that you could just go and get a job. And you realize, I don't think you can, if you didn't go to school for broadcasting and start as an intern and work your way into that industry. But he gave me a piece of advice. He's a very smart guy. And he said, but dude, you worked in government. You know so many people politically, like, work your Rolodex. And I was like, that's actually a good idea. So, I started shaking some trees and seeing what would come out. And I ended up in an email exchange with the executive producer of the Mark Levin Show, and Rich Valdés, and who's my brother from another. And he was like, look, we're looking for something that's very unique. We're looking for somebody who understands politics, who understands the issues, to be a producer on this show, an associate producer, really to handle the live call-in portion of the show where Mark takes calls. But Mark's a pretty cerebral guy, and we don't want weak calls. We need really good calls. And we're finding that the guys in radio, they don't know the issues politically well enough to get us the right call, to filter out and get us the best call. And, do you think you could do it? And I was like, I could do that all day, but I don't know anything about radio. And he was like, we don't care if you know about radio. We'll teach you that. And I was like, great, let's do it. So the next step was to meet with Mark, and I met with the great one. And he was like, all right, I think I like you. Yeah. After we talked for like 20 minutes, and I was like, oh, how cool. And that began my role as Mr. Call Screener on the Mark Levin Show. And it it didn't take much time after that. I'm pretty talkative, and Mr. Producer turned to me and he's like, "Bro, you talk way too much to be on this side of the studio glass." He's like, Mark's supposed to be doing the talking on that side, and we're supposed to be quiet and do our job. And I was like, "Oh, sorry." And he said, "No, no, no. I think you need to channel that." He literally grabbed me by my wrist and he was like, "Come here." And he brought me to a guy named Chris Libertini, who was the director of production for WABC Radio in New York City. And we were all in this big studio there. And he, there was multiple studios. And he, prior to that, had done the commercials, what they call the radio imaging for the Howard Stern show. So making the intros and the sounds and all that stuff. And he's like, "Can you shut this guy up for me? Can you give him somewhere to talk so that when he comes here, he's all talked out and he can really focus on the show?" And he was like, "Maybe." And he tells me, "Come with me." And he brings me to the other side of the building. And he introduces me to a guy named Chris Rudsky, who was the director of Cumulus Podcast. And I spoke with him. And he was like, "So what do you want to do? You want to do a podcast?" And I was like, "I don't even know what a podcast is." I just got here. I was there for a week. And he said, "It's a recording. It's like a radio show, but you have a lot more free reign. You don't have to take breaks. There's no radio clock. You can do whatever you want." And I was like, "Okay, whatever you say." What would I talk about? This wasn't an idea of mine. This was something they were presenting. And I was like, "I like it." All I wanted to do was talk on the radio. That was the whole reason I came there. And he said, "Chris will help you with a show opening and he'll create something for you with some imaging." So he did. He created this. We created this podcast called "This Is America" with Rich Valdés, and I started doing it weekly and then 3 times a week. And shortly soon after that, I was just doing the podcast, and I didn't release it anywhere. I was just recording episodes. I started getting some connections with people. One of the guest hosts on the Levin show was like, "Oh, I'm out in Philly on a different station, but we might need a guest host on a weekend. Are you interested in that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get on the radio. Let's do it." So he hooked me up, and then I was excited about it and talking to Mr. Producer about it. And Curtis Sliwa was passing by, and he tells him, "Hey, this guy Valdes, he's going to be on the radio in Philly." And he's like, "Oh, you do radio?" And I was like, "I apparently do." So he said, "Oh, maybe you should do some with me." And I was like, "Really? With Curtis Sliwa? That's fantastic." So he invited me to do a show with him because his co-host was absent one day. And it just snowballed after that. I went in there. I had a great time. I learned from some of the best in the game. And they liked me. They thought I was a natural. And for whatever reason, they thought I was entertaining. And I was like, "Okay, me too. I love it. You like me. I love it, And it just kept going. And then they eventually gave me a weekend show. And then I had a Monday through Friday show on our Long Island station. And then I would fill in for Mark Levin pretty regularly. One day he trusted me, and then he was like, "Oh, you did a good job." And I did it again and again and again. I've done it dozens of times now. And it was that was really for me the big shot in the arm. It was like, wow, I get to fill in for the great one. It's at the time it was the 3rd biggest show in the country. And I got a lot of positive feedback, and it blew me away. I was like, wow, so cool. So, like filling in one night for Levin was more thrilling than doing a Monday through Friday local radio show in New York City. It had 14 or 15 times the reach. If I reached 1 million people during the day on my radio show on one station, you go on Levin once and you're just blowing it away. So it was just thrilling to talk to people everywhere at the same time. And that still excites me. The fact that I can say something and get a caller from Alaska or Hawaii or Canada, or Maine, and we're all talking at the same time. To me, that's the beauty of live radio. So I did that. And then one day I got a call from our executives at Westwood at Cumulus, and they said, "Can you fill in for Jim Bohannon?" And I was like, "Sure, I'd love to fill in for Bohannon." I get off at 9:00 at night from my production work with Levin. I was on the radio already doing a daily Monday through Friday show, the midday show. And I said, "Sure, you tell me radio, I say yes." So I did it. And they said, "It's only 1 week. We only need you on a Friday. Maybe might need you next Friday." And I said, "Okay, cool. Whatever you need." So I went, and the following week they were like, "You think you could do 2 days?" And I said, and I told Curtis, and he said, "Listen to me, Richie. When they tell you, do you think you could do 2 days? You're going to say this." I said, what do I say? And he said, you tell him I'll do as many days as you need. And I said, Curtis, I'll do as many days as you need. And they said, oh, good. And like clockwork, the following week, they said, do you think you could do the whole week? I said, guaranteed. I said, I'll do the whole month if you need me to. And his philosophy in that was, he was saying, just be the guy that's reliable. Be the guy that they can go to when they know, oh, this guy's going to say yes. He's hungry. He wants to work. So I was that guy. And I said yes. And the next thing you know, they said, do you think you could fill in for him indefinitely? Because he's sick and he's not coming in for a little bit. And I didn't ask any questions. I said, you should tell me to show up. I'm showing up. And I did. And then finally got better and he came back. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm happy for him. Because during the time I was there, I hadn't met him until after that. And people loved this man. They adored Jimbo. And I had heard the show and I knew who he was, but I didn't know him. And I was like, yeah, he's a really nice guy, gentle giant, just a heck of a broadcaster, a real legend. And then we talked when he came back and he thanked me for my fill-in, and he was very gracious. And, he didn't have to do that. That's not typical in our business. You say, thanks for filling in for me. It's just not, and I was like, wow, thank you for taking the time. Like, what a gentleman. And we talked and he gave me some good pointers and feedback, and we emailed a little bit. And I thought that was it. It's over. It was great while it lasted. I was on his show for months. And I thought, what better exposure on the national scene could I have gotten? A couple of now and then for Levin, but months on Bohannon, a lot of people knew who I was at that point and were giving me good feedback. So I was like, you know what? I know it takes a long time to make it. I know a lot of guys in this business for 20 years before they get a syndicated gig, if that was their goal. Actually, wasn't a goal of mine. I always wanted to do local radio. I wanted to be a New York City radio host until I was 80, and just that was what I wanted to do. And one day they called me and they said, we got good news and bad news. And I said, what's up? And I thought they were going to ask me to do more fill-in because Jim had to go somewhere or whatever. And they said, he's retiring. And I was like, oh, wow, that's heavy. And at the time, they weren't that soft in the call. It was, he's retiring because, and I was like, whoa. Like, I think I even got teary, honestly, because I put myself in his shoes and I was like, how do you work for 50 years to get to this level, have an audience that adores you, have a great gig, killing it in late night. And then you're there, right. He had esophageal cancer. Mm-hmm. And I was like, the one thing I never want to not do is, I don't want to be able to not talk, right? I want to always be able to talk. And it was just like, wow, that's heavy. And I was like, wow, well, I've learned to always ask for the bad news first. And I said, well, what's the good news? And I didn't see it coming. And they were like, we think you're the guy. And I was like, for what? The guy for what? And they were like, the guy to take over for that show. And I was like another fill-in gig. And they were like, no, like on a multi-year contract. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming, because I really felt like a fish out of water. Radio in New York City it's a lot of fighting. You fight with it's a rough area. The callers are rough. You get rough back. It was very rough. And I had to learn to be a lot gentler with an older caller, someone who's used to dealing with Jim Bohannon, who was nothing like me. I was fighting with liberals on the radio in New York City. It was a different vibe. I was surprised they even wanted me. and it was, I was just blown away. And they were like, yeah, I was like, wow. So I also was never an interviewer. Levin was influenced a lot by Limbaugh, and Limbaugh told him, listen, you're the show, man. We're not here to interview people. We don't need those people to make the show. You don't need anything to make the show. If you don't get a caller in the whole show, you're the show. And Levin taught me that. He said, Richie, you're the show. You're the show. You don't need anything. You're the show. So it was almost like a point of like working out, like, oh, I can watch how much I can lift. It was, I can do 3 hours with no audio and no callers. Watch. And that was how I flexed on the radio. And then I get this show where it was 3 hours of interviews. And I was like, oh, like it was such a culture shock for me.
Like a big
I didn't have, I felt I didn't have the skill set. I was like, I don't know. All I do is talk. How am I supposed to listen and listen well? I don't know if I know how to do that. But again, you're your own worst enemy. And Mark gave me some advice because he had launched an interview show. And he said, you ask one good open-ended question, Richie, and you let them run with it. Let them go until they run out of steam. Let them do the talking. And I was like, okay, I could do that. And that's what I did. And I mean, I've had Alan Dershowitz tell me, you do a really good job with interviews. Had Dr. Phil tell me, you know the right questions to ask. And I was like, I'm winging it, guys. I'm winging it every day. I'm winging it. It's just amazing. But though, when you get that type of feedback from people, you can't help but think, not that you're good at something, but I'm getting it done, and I'm going in the right direction. So that was a great thing for me. And I still don't know if I'm a good interviewer or not, but I do know we've got the biggest show in America from 9 to midnight. And I'm proud of it, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm grateful for the ones who started it before me, Larry King, Jim Bohannon. I'm just grateful that I'm able to keep that audience, and we've been able to grow. We added 25 stations this year. Last year we added a little under 20 stations. So we've been growing and growing by pretty good numbers. And it's a thrilling ride. I'm grateful to be here, and grateful for the opportunity to work with you guys as well.
We're super happy about it too. Not everybody does call in. How about for your call in? Do you do the screening, or do you do the live, or how does that work?
Here, so again, this is pretty cool too. I'm glad you asked that question. You're right. Not a lot of people do call-ins, especially in your part of town. They started doing away with call-in radio for whatever reason on the West Coast. I think it was a budgetary thing. They couldn't afford that third producer to run the show and paying the host, and then you got to pay the third guy to do the phones. And it was interesting to me, because I did a couple of years of, like, several weeks long stints on a station in Seattle. And when I was there, they were like, "Oh, we don't do that." And I was like, "You don't do calls?" Because I just had developed my own love for calls. I love talking to people that either want to fight with me or just talk with me. I love to hear that perspective from a different part of the country. And it was interesting. They did a text line. People would text a comment and you could read it off. And it's a little not the same, but at least there's interaction. I think the interactivity is the important part. But yeah, Larry King had a 5-hour show that went all the way into 2 or 3 a.m. And he coined the term open phones across America, open phone America. And he loved it. And he did a great job with it. And I listened to him a lot, not while he was on, but after, studying the tapes. And I would hear the way he did things. And it was a brilliant way of doing radio. It was just, he was like, talk about whatever you want, let's go. And it was fascinating, because he could be talking about the budget in Washington, and then somebody would call in and say, I was watching a documentary about aliens. And they would get into a whole thing, and he would have a very interesting conversation with them. And he was such a big media figure that people were like, yes, I was talking to Larry King about aliens. And it was just a thing, which is why he was on Letterman and his show was so popular. And I thought, I love that. And Jim Bohannon was his news guy. And he took over the show, but he kept that format of, open phones at the end of the show. And I thought, who am I to get in the way of that? Right. Because they told me you could do whatever you want. You can rename the show. You can do whatever you want. Change the format. You don't want to take calls. Don't take calls. And I was like, why would I not take calls? I'm Mr. Call Screener. I love taking calls. So I said, no, I'm going to keep it as is, because it's a big audience. Why would you break something that works? It was my thinking. And they're there. I love them. I got to know them when I was here for Bohannon. So yeah, we have a call screener that, just to make sure that, nobody's going to curse and they're going to get dumped off the air or whatever. But I pretty much take anything. And I told them, anybody who's disagreeing, just put disagree on the screen so I know, and I'll go to them first, because that always makes a better call, and it makes for better radio. It's more entertainment value. And that's really what we do. Occasionally, if I find it, and this is something I learned from Levin, stole it right out of the playbook from the great one. There were times when if somebody were to call and they were giving me a hard time because they wouldn't get to the point. Usually that's not an ideal person for radio, because the time is finite and it's not going to make good listening content. But sometimes it was because they were just too obstacular. And, and Mark would just say, without knowing their name, if he would just see that the line was on and somebody was on it, and he'd say, let's go to line 4. And I was like, you don't even know where they're calling from. You don't even know their name. And he'd say, hello. and he would talk to them cold. And it was really entertaining. So every now and again, I'll do that too. I'll just take somebody totally cold, just to see, what they're saying and what they want to do. And sometimes, one time I had a guy, he was gay, and he was calling from somewhere in Pennsylvania, and he said a bunch of crazy things, and then ultimately made a comment, and he said he was gonna, he said something very funny. And to me, it was one of the funniest calls I've ever had. And it was very rude what he said, but it was very funny. And I was like, this works. I'm going to keep doing it.
That's
So yeah,
hilarious.
definitely taking calls.
Now, I know your family is very important to you. You have two
Mm,
girls, and you've
yeah.
talked about them a couple times. I saw on your Instagram that you have like a whole little My Girls section.
Yes.
You mentioned how challenging it was with the radio. And so, what's that look like now with the demands of radio? Like, how do you make sure that you keep that priority for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you that's tough. And it's funny. Right before I came here, I was just talking to a couple of buddies of mine. They're around my age, and but their kids are little. I mean, like they have a 6 year old, and and I was like, it's so different for me now because I want to be with them as often as I can. And they're busy. Like my big girl just finished college. She graduated. She's going to graduate in May, like the formal ceremony. But she took her last course at Liberty University of Virginia, December 14th. So just recently, and she's living in Florida. And she's been here to visit since she graduated, but it's just not the same, right? She's busy doing her thing. She's working and living life and my little one still lives with me. She's 19, and that's great. You know, we have a really fun relationship. But she also, we don't get to go to the park anymore. You know, I mean, she's 19. She's in college. She's a sophomore, and she works at a movie theater for one of the big ones. And so she's always working, and movie theaters work pretty late. So, sometimes that works because I get off at midnight now, and she gets off at midnight many times. So we'll hang out for a little bit before we go to bed, which is cute. But we don't get to hang out a lot, so whenever I do get a chance, at an event or whatever, we spend as much time as we can. But the section, the highlight reel you're talking about, where we used to go on vacations together, that's almost an impossibility right now because their schedules are so disparate. And, it's like I invite them, the Tennessee trip, I invited both of them. Only one of them could make it. I have another trip to Europe coming up in May, I think. And only one of them, I think, might be coming. And it's might sound corny, but it's a little sad that you can't
Mm,
spend, this time with your kids. But it is what it is, right? I mean, that's life. I don't want her to put her life on hold or, ask for time that she hasn't earned yet off. She's brand new, and like I didn't take days off. I still don't even take days off. So it's, I get it. If anybody gets it, I do.
Now, you've talked about your influencers, you've talked about the people that influenced your style. What about like what have you set up for your support systems? Like, do you have coaches, like your voice? Do you have a trainer for the gym? Do you have a chef? Do you have nutritionist? What does it look like for you?
Yeah. So that's a good question. You know, I I'll say my immediate support system is this. My ex-girlfriend used to tell me we get into an argument, and I was like, I don't know, I got to get back to you. And she's like, why? You got to talk to your council of advisors. And she was talking about my friends that I've known since the sixth grade, and that really is kind of how life works for me. I'm in radio today because of my boy Juan. We were at Wendy's, and he said you should get into talk radio, and I was like, not a bad idea. Once he made the case for me, it worked out pretty good. So I listen to them because they know me really well. I have ADHD, and I'm all over the place. I really am, and I'm
I feel
amazed.
you.
Yeah, I'm amazed that I do as well as I do sometimes. I look at just coming in here. I saw this stack of mail, and I was like, this letter is part two to that letter because I forgot to send the payment for the Easy Pass. I know that's what that is, and they're going to charge me. It's just amazing the things you forget to do. But point is, I do have a lot of support, and it's probably even unreasonable for some people, but I hang out with my friends a lot. I hang out with my family a lot. My brother's around a lot. I keep a lot of people close. Up until recently, the pastor that when I started going to church when I was 19, he died just a few months ago. But he was a real solid person in my life that if I needed some advice, I'd go straight to him, and oftentimes even unsolicited. He would just hear things. He'd hear me on the radio or seeing, he'd say, how you doing? I heard you doing this and blah, blah, blah. You're making moves, everything good. Stay focused, stay here, and he would just give me very solid advice. And that part was always very important to me. I started going to a new church last year. So cool with the pastor, but we don't have that, 20 plus years of relationship. And And, my prayer life, I think, is important whenever I'm able to hear, the clear, I never get the James Earl Jones voice of God or the Morgan Freeman voice of God. I wish I did,
I do
but I
too.
don't. But I have that. And in terms of the health side, this whole journey started, I was very good at eating, fast food for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or at least fast food for breakfast and lunch, and then having a very nice Puerto Rican, Caribbean, Hispanic meal with that much rice and 4 portions of meat, and you eat till you're almost passing out and you're like, yeah, now I'm good. And honestly, everybody I know did that. And different metabolisms respond different ways. Some people are fat, some are not, some get a little chubby, some are like my dad ate just like I did, and he was built great, 32 waist, 28 sometimes. He was real trim. That didn't work like that for me. I was 269 pounds, very round, and I was very tired all the time. And when my dad died, I was 39, and I went to the doctor and I was like, look, my dad had a stroke and he's dead now. And I just want to make sure I'm not dead. My dad was strong and he died at 80. I was like, if I don't want this to happen to me in my 60s, my mom died in her 60s. And I was like, this is, talk to me. He said, all right, we'll run some tests. And when you come back, we'll talk. I came back for the follow up and he said, oh, I said, how's it going? And honestly, I'm optimistic with a lot of things. So I was like, how's it look, doc? And he said, everything is on track for you to drop dead at 50 of a massive heart attack or stroke. And I was like, no, seriously though, how am I doing? And he was like, on my medical license, I'm supposed to put you on every medicine that's available right now. High blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol. You're all of them. He's like, your numbers are horrible. And he was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I don't know. I go to Burger King for breakfast. I hit McDonald's for lunch. If there's time, I'll have a home cooked meal at night. Otherwise, I will, Pizza Hut, And he was like, do you hear yourself? And I was like, I didn't hear it. It didn't sound weird to me at all. It really didn't. I was like, what's the problem here? I don't get it, and it took me a while. And he was like, he had a very frank conversation with me, and I'll share some of it with you. He said, look, I deal with you guys a lot. And I said, who's you guys? And he was like, Puerto Rican guys. And I was like, oh, is this a racial? And he said, you guys eat roast pork more than once a year. It's not just for Christmas. He's like, it's a staple in your diet. You fry everything. Everything comes with 4 portions of rice, bread with everything. He was like, this is not, your body can't handle that. And that's why you're growing, and that's why you're tired, and that's why you're nothing's working. And I was like, I trust you, because he was the son of the doctor who delivered my eldest daughter. The guy had 4 kids, and all 4 became doctors. So I'd known these people for a long time. And I said, okay, what do you think I should do? I said, if you're going to tell me to go to the gym, that ain't going to happen. He said, I'm going to come up with a plan for you that's going to be 90% what you put in your mouth, 5% supplements, 5% exercise. I said, I can handle that. And he gave me a sheet of paper and it said ketogenic diet. And on it, it said, eat anything that's green. Eat anything that once had eyes. As much water as you want, as much coffee as you want. And then it had 4 things I couldn't eat: pasta, potatoes, bread, and rice. And that sounded scary to me, very scary. I was like, whoa, no rice, no potatoes, and no bread. I was like, that's what I eat every day. And he was like, I know, that's the problem. And he explained how it worked. And he said, once you starve yourself of all these carbs, your body's going to burn fat. Once you burn some fat, you're going to feel a lot better. All these numbers are going to improve. Your blood pressure is going to get better. This pre-diabetes that you're having is going to get better. You're not going to feel tired all the time. And he said, and you got to walk. You got to walk a little bit. You got to move a little bit. 5% exercise. Just 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Just do something so that you're elevating your heart rate a little bit. Because if you're sitting down eating pasta all day, it's not going to work. And I was like, okay. I didn't do it, honestly. I didn't do the walking. I did it like the first week, and I lost 40 pounds in 3 months. And I was like a rock star. I was like, wow, this is so awesome. And I did it. I did it for 4 years. And then I started introducing more carbs. But in the beginning, I could only have 17 grams of carbs per day. And since I didn't know how to measure 17 grams, I usually just went with 0 carbs most of those days. And that it works until it doesn't work anymore. And for me, what happened was I got ill. When you do keto, your potassium level can go up or down. I forget what it was, but messed me up. And I was I thought I was dying. I was like, oh, I feel, I thought it was over for me. And I ended up in the hospital, and they were like, why is your potassium level so crazy? And the doctor was like, did you do the soup once a week? It's the bottom line of that sheet I gave you. And I was like, what's soup? And he's like, you got to have broth. You got to have something with high sodium, like 1,000 milligrams of sodium once a week. Otherwise your
Your
potassium levels are
electrolytes.
going to go all
Yeah.
over. And I was like, oh, I didn't read that part. He was like, just have the soup and then you'll be all right. And I was. And then after that, I added the soup once a week to my thing, and everything worked. But I started having a little more carbs, and I was happy. I was like, I lost weight. I lost a bunch of sizes. I was good. And then I remembered, many conversations I've had over the years about being healthy, being healthy, being healthy. And I was like, I'm great. I feel great now. I look great. I'm super. And I saw another old friend of mine, and he had a whole bunch of muscles. And I was like, man, where'd you get those? He's like, I've been working out. And I was like, wow, that's cool. I want to work out. So I tried it, and I was like, man, this is hard. And when you introduce the carbs again, you do gain some of the weight back. So I probably gained back 10 pounds and probably closer to 15. And it didn't look terrible, but I felt it. I felt sluggish. And I was like, I think I'm going to need to go to the gym. And it was just a thought. I went to the doctor for my checkup, and he was like, hey, um, you're gaining weight and you're gonna need to go. He's like, that's gonna push your pre-diabetes back into a thing. It's gonna become a thing again. He's like, you're not in the clear. You need to work out. And I was like, so I have to walk again? And he was like, no, you're beyond walking. You need to go to the gym and do like the treadmill. And I was like, whoa, this wasn't our part of our deal. And he was like, I'm reading the numbers, bro. He's like, you give me, I give you. He's like, the A1C number is getting too high. It was down to like 5.7, and then it went up to 6. And I was like, I got to work now. So, okay, I had to work. So I started going to the gym, and the girlfriend I had at the time, she was constantly not on me about going to the gym, but she liked going to the gym. And she was like, I can't function if I don't go to the gym. I need to go to the gym. It clears my mind. It's this and that. And I was the exact opposite. I was like, no, it's a nuisance. It's a pain in the butt. I don't like going. I just don't like going. But I got a sponsor at that time that had an app that helped you manage your day, your gym intake versus your caloric intake. And I'd gotten a free version of it since I was doing the endorsements for it. And it was a great app, and it helped me a lot. So I started using that, and it got me into going to the gym, and I got into the habit. I still don't like going to the gym, but I realize it's like, if you don't like showering, you have to do it, right? I happen to love showering, but I don't like going to the gym still, but I go. And I started going from just doing cardio to doing weights like a year ago. And I feel the difference. I feel better. I feel stronger. My energy level is a lot better than just doing, because I used to do the treadmill, and I would be tired at the end of that. It was just exhausting, and I didn't get any boost from it. The lifting weights, you definitely get a boost from.
Yeah.
And I feel better. But it's just discipline that I haven't developed yet. I guess I'm developing,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to keep a positive outlook on it. But some of my friends are like, oh, if I don't go to the gym, I'm like, not me, bro. I would still rather go to McDonald's like today. I'm still there. I haven't graduated to that level yet. It's a struggle for me, but I'm still doing it. And I'm still under 200 pounds. So I'm happy. I fluctuate between the 185 and 195. I'm trying to, just trying to keep going in the right direction.
Are there
So
any activities that exercise activities that you like sports or hiking, or like something that you
as a kid, I
prefer to
did some
do?
jujitsu,
Yeah.
and I like doing jujitsu. And I did some as an adult, but I got an injury
Mm,
in sparring, and it was just like, it made me realize, as an adult, you're stronger, your opponents are stronger, and you're doing it for fun and games, for exercise, for whatever skill, but the injuries are real. And the injury lasted years. I mean, I had this problem in my neck for a long time, and from getting choked out. And I was like, oh man, this is tough. So I didn't do that as much anymore, because I was like, I can't take time off of work because I need to heal, because I got my
right.
butt kicked today doing jujitsu, or vice versa. I hurt somebody while we were sparring. So I was like, I don't want to do that. So I kind of laid off on that. Now I could probably do it again, only because I'm lighter. I'm a little bit more agile. And I think I could handle it better. I think then I wasn't in shape. The fitness level was too low. So I was getting hurt because I wasn't strong enough.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you're working out, you're just a little bit harder. And if you're harder,
Absolutely.
you can roll on the floor better and fight better. So it might be something I do. But right now I'm enjoying the weight training. It's not easy for me either. That same injury spilled into like a rotator cuff injury. So it's hard lifting weights for me. And I'm okay with that. I don't mind working through some of the pain. I just don't want to get hurt. And I'm taking it really slow. And
Yeah.
because if I take it fast, I'll get discouraged and I don't want to do that.
Well, it looks like you have a crew that comes with you to the gym. That always helps.
Yeah, honestly, and it's another level of discipline I haven't gotten yet. I don't go alone. My friends, when they bail out, I don't go. And they're like, "You should go." I'm like, "Nah, I don't go. I'm going. You guys go, I go." I kind of put the pressure on them. It's like, this is accountability, guys. If you guys want to see me fit, you gotta show up.
I love that. What do you think is the hardest thing about what you do?
Hmm. I don't know. Honestly, I can't say it's hard. It's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. But I guess the hardest part is the business side of it. The reality is I would talk on the radio for free if I could. If they said, "Hey, there's an open mic. You want to go?" Yes, I will. I probably would, but you can't do that, right? There's a financial side of this that has to happen, and radio only works if there's some money behind it. And that's the part, I guess, that's not hard, but I have zero interest in it. Zero interest. I just want to show up and do the show. And, there's parts of that you have to do, there's sponsors. Not every sponsor is great. Right. And you might love some of them. And I love all of mine. I only take the ones I like. And that's, I guess, the hard part that, sometimes, Planned Parenthood, for example, they have a huge budget and they're always trying to get on radio and they don't care what show it is because they're hoping that they can influence people one way or another. That's not something I'm with. So I never take those endorsements. And, that's easy for me, but it's hard when, things have to be done and this has to get done and that has to get done. So, the business side of it, I guess, is a thing that I'm not even really involved with, but I'd say that's the hard part. Is it's not all fun and games. It's not just having a big conversation with 6 million of your favorite friends at night. It's, it really is a business.
It is a business. Yeah.
And that part typically escapes me.
What about it sounds like the easiest part is the talking. What about the research and the like knowing what's going on and kind of always being plugged in? What is that
That's
like?
lifestyle. And I don't find it hard, but I could see how people could find it hard. And it just requires for you exactly what you said, always being plugged in and always being researched. If you can build that into your life, it just happened to be for me. I had worked in politics. So what I was doing on my phone typically was looking at the news of the day, seeing who said what. No way they said that. Sending that to my friends. Did you see this? And then sending me something back. Yeah, Senator so-and-so just said whatever. This was always a part of my life. So I was always dialed in that way. Plus I was in politics. So I was dialed in with a lot of political people. So that was always there. And it's just a benefit now because, 20 years later, I have friends from politics years ago. I worked on the George Bush campaign in 2004. Some of those people are in different places. A couple of them were in the Trump administration in the first go round. So it was nice to be able to just text somebody and get the scoop on something. But that was always a part of my life. If you're not doing that already, then you might find that exhausting. So tomorrow I have a dinner. It's an early dinner. It's like 3:00, 4:00 dinner in New York City. They're celebrating Lincoln Day and not something I would typically do on a Sunday, but I'm going to have a blast there, right? I'm going to see a lot of my political buddies. I'm going to see people I haven't seen in a bit since last year's event, right? So that's something I probably would be doing outside of radio anyway, but being in radio, it fits just so well. Now, if you're not doing this type of work and you don't live like that, I go to CPAC whether I'm radio or not. So I'm at these conventions. They're not part of my job. They were part of my life already. If I wasn't doing those things, then I'd have to do those things because you got to be in the mix somehow so that people, to meet people and get the right guests. And otherwise, why would they want to talk to you? And that part would be hard. But I think that was why my friend had the foresight of saying, you should probably just get into radio. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. If you weren't on radio, what would you be doing?
I'd be on a beach.
You'd be on a beach.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of job I would have, but TV's okay. If they'll have me, I don't know. It doesn't have the same liberty. It doesn't bring out your personality the same way. You don't get to really enjoy the free flow of a conversation. TV's very short segments. You're talking 5 or 6 minutes sharing with somebody, right? Because
You're always in
it's
the
a
makeup
guest.
chair.
Yeah, right, exactly. And they come out to you, which is funny. I'm like, I don't even have hair, and they come, and they start patting me during the breaks. I like the media is cool, but honestly, I don't know. I like anything where I can deal with people and hopefully help them some way. In this job, I think we help them with information that they're trying to filter through because there's a lot. And if you can develop the level of trust with your listeners where they're like, and they've told me this, that's how I know. They say, I wait to listen to your show because I want to know your take on things. I respect your view. That's cool. Because then you're doing a job now. You're the guy that's like, all right, you've heard a lot of things. Let me tell you what I think this is. And you do what you want with it, right? But that's the job in many ways. And I think that's cool. So any job where I could do that, in many ways, I see that role. This jewelry business that I have, people, I'm getting married. I need an engagement ring. I don't have a lot of money. Let me help, right? I have a whole lot of creative ways of helping you. We can go with a really thin solitaire band. There's a lot of things you could do. You can go slightly smaller than a carat or slightly smaller than 2 carats, save a little money on the stone. I want to be able to help people, and ultimately, and I think whatever I could do, and if I could help people on a beach, that would be great.
I can see you as a pastorate on the beach.
Yeah, I think that would be great. I always thought if I didn't have ADHD and I knew how to run a hotel or a resort, that might be a gig I would like.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially on a beach, like you said.
Yeah, but I'd have to be like the guy, because I feel like when you go to those places, there's always like the maitre d' or the guy, the manager he doesn't get his hands dirty. He's just like, hey, hi, how can I fix your problem?
Right.
I'm here to help. I'm here to say yes. I'd like that guy's job is a good job.
I love that. What about how do you keep your voice? I mean, even for me, just doing some of this or learning how to read radio ads, I find like, all of a sudden you're talking for 3 hours. Like, how do you do that every night?
Well, I think I talk a lot. I always have, but I don't, there's things you can do, right? You have to drink a lot of water. You have to hydrate. You can't have milk and cheese and anything like popcorn or anything like that an hour or 2 before your show, because it could get stuck in your throat. You'll be doing that little cat thing for the whole show. John Batchelor taught me that. You learn a few things. But radio has the blessing of breaks. And in the break, sometimes being quiet is the best thing you can do, and think and read, so that you're not talking through the break. Not having a lot of dust around. I have an air filter that I use that works wonders. Dust will make you a lot and make your voice a little raspier. But yeah, you're right. Your voice is a big part of it. And one day this week, I don't know, it was a really nice day, and there was a little bit of pollen, and I was a little raspy. And we'd gone to the gym a little later than usual, and I was tired. I was very tired. I was usually, if I go at the right time, I feel kind of pumped up to go into the show. And I usually have some nice Spanish coffee before the show, and I'm wired. But that day I didn't have the coffee. I was really tired. I tried to take my nap, but it didn't work. And I just laid there. And my buddy sent me a text and he said, hey, I'm listening. Doesn't even sound like you. You sound so hoarse. And I was like, wow, thanks for the heads up, because nobody else is telling me that. And I realized this is a guy I go to the gym with every day. He knows me. He's known me for a very long time. So if he can notice a change in my voice, the listeners are definitely hearing it as well. And right away I got some tea, a little honey in there, and that always helps. Warm honey and tea. Warm tea and honey does the trick. But you do what you can. Ultimately is the answer. You do whatever you can and try to avoid anything harsh. And drinking alcohol, don't do that before the show. I've had a wine or two, and I like red wine. Red wine is very drying. It really makes you dry. So if you go to a cocktail party before the show, you won't be drunk, but you might be dry, and that's not a good look either.
Yeah. What about the trolling that people do now? How do you handle that? Like the hate?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I was taught like the first day, if people aren't hating on you, you're not doing it right. So it's kind of like, why are they not saying anything bad? You need it. It has to be there. Otherwise, the radio audience, people think conservative talk radio is like a bunch of crazy right wingers, and it's really not. 50% of our audience are the people that disagree. they listen and they want to hear a different perspective, and they hate you. They really do. I know they hate me, but they listen, and they've been a steady half of the audience forever. And it is what it is. So there's an old saying, don't feed the trolls because they'll come back. So occasionally I will feed them because sometimes you just have to take the bait. But for the most part, I just let them have their talk. And, I have a power they don't have. This massive microphone. It's huge. You can sit there and troll me on Twitter or whatever you want. And I can go on here and I can tell all my friends about you and I can make fun of you. And then you could call and we could have a real fight, like men on the radio. And I just take it in stride. I used to take it a little bit more serious. Like I said, I fought a lot on the radio in New York City, and people were more vicious there. They're more vicious, and they were calling from a train ride away from the studio. So, there were times in my immaturity and my youth in radio, I would say, you know what, listen, I get off in an hour and I'll be outside Madison Square Garden. I'll see you there. and nobody ever showed up. But I was serious, and because they would get me so mad sometimes, and I didn't want to fight them. I would have if I had to, but it was really, I wanted to talk to them because I was like, how stupid are you and sometimes they would get crazy, but and my buddy would tell me you're nuts. And I was like, screw these people. But and then I saw this movie called Talk Radio. I don't know if you ever seen it, with Eric Bogosian. Yes. He gets shot at the end. Spoiler alert. And I was like, all right, maybe I need to slow my roll and take it easy. So, and you learn, and you've learned temperance to not allow this stuff get to you. And again, if you go back to whatever you just read that day, if you're reading about the fruit of the spirit and, long suffering and patience and kindness, and you're like, that wasn't any of those things. And that's, that type of reflection I do daily, where I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm hitting it today. Sorry, Lord. Yeah, I think I missed the mark. But yeah, it is what it is. I think when they call in and they disagree is really some of the best radio ever. And that's the part I love the most. And when I do, it always motivates more callers to call in. And they're like, I love the way you handled that guy, or that guy was an idiot, or you didn't give that guy enough time. You cut him off. You were spewing your right-wing talking points, and you didn't let him tell the truth. Whichever one is fine. I'm always just looking for an engaged and lively conversation.
Has there ever been a time like where you had a topic and you were certain, like you had a view, and then somebody came on and you were like, oh, different information than I thought, or I didn't realize what I didn't know?
Mm-hmm. Many times, in particular in foreign policy. A lot of times in foreign policy, you can, at least I know, I can look at things a certain way and speak with somebody who, in my opinion, has a better understanding of it or a different understanding of it than I do. And a lot of times that comes from people high level in the military or high level in intelligence that can give you a different perspective on things than you had going in. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And that's happened to me a number of times, where I was like, oh, I didn't look at it that way. And I could see why that might be detrimental, or why my original proposal might not have been a good one, or not as effective. Foreign policy is very complicated, but I do boil it down to a way of thinking, at least in our country for many years, of we're either going to use military force to get you to do what we want, and not like coercion, like you're going to do this because you can't beat us. So you have no choice. It's either fight us or play ball with us. Not because we're threatening you, but because we're bigger. Or B, we're going to bribe you. Quote unquote foreign aid, USAID, that story. And I've always seen it that way. And I'm glad that we are where we are now, because I don't think we need to bribe people. I think Trump's really got the right angle here of, let's just make a deal. Let's make money together. And the deal he's presented to Zelensky, I think, was a very good deal. Good for America, good for them. And that's a win-win. Everybody's making money in the process. We're not spending money, we're making money. I love that idea. And there's an old saying in politics, it's always about the money. And when it's not about the money, it's about the money, right? That doesn't change. Mm-hmm. Trump is always about the money too, but he's not necessarily about us giving you money to get something from you, or necessarily unfairly taking money. The United States getting into, and just as an example, I'm not going to do a whole show here, but the United States getting into this mineral deal with Ukraine in my opinion, is better than them becoming a NATO ally. You're in with the biggest NATO ally, the United States, who literally has an investment in the dirt of your country. Don't mess with the dirt, right? So your dirt is now protected. Just imagine everything else. We can't have bombs hitting that land. We can't, it's precious dirt, right? So this, and the part that's richest in minerals is the part where Putin's made the biggest gains. So that is pretty clear to me that if we have an interest in this dirt and it's the one that Putin thinks he's conquered, whatever deal this ends up being, Putin's not going to take that particular piece of dirt. He may take another piece of dirt that has less minerals, but not the part that we're interested in. And I think Zelensky was short-sighted in his handling of this deal. But my point was that that's a very clear example of how if we handled more deals like that, there'd be more money coming into our country, meaning less money coming out of your corporate taxes, your personal taxes, and everything else.
Interesting. Yeah. I love the different views. It's always interesting to me to learn. So I always find I don't know a lot.
Well, none of us know what we don't know, right? And you don't know until you meet somebody who's done it or can teach you something, right? And so I talked to a general last night who was giving me some really interesting insight. And sometimes you talk to people who just spent time in these countries and can educate you on something, and it's like interesting. And I think usually there is, if you've ever had a good fight with a significant other, I know for me, I always look at the arguments I have with my girlfriend where I thought I was always right and she was always wrong, and she thought the same, that she was right and I was wrong. And you know, you let some time pass and you look back and then you say, I could see how she saw this from her perspective, given how she sees the world. And I see why I saw it the way I do, given how I see the world. And I don't know that that makes either of us wrong. Now, I guess in a relationship dynamic, it's easiest to say, okay, we see things differently. We're going to break up, take care. But in real life, it's not like that. You can't just break up, right?
With everybody.
You know, Zelensky marched out of the White House yesterday, but we can walk away from that and lose nothing. We're not going to lose a single American soldier. Nothing bad will happen to the United States if we turn our back on Ukraine. But we shouldn't. We shouldn't do that. I don't think it's the right thing to do. I think we should broker a deal, because when you're the biggest person on the block and there's an old lady getting her pocketbook stolen and you're 6'7" and you know you can curl 500 pounds with one hand, then obviously we're looking at you, big guy. You should do something to step in and do the right thing. So I think there's that part of this world police that people don't like, but is real. It's just a thing. So I think we'll ultimately get to a good place there. But I think that this new model of going after foreign policy that is a win-win and puts America first and makes sure that we're making money on every deal, brilliant. And it probably would not have happened but for getting a hotel marketing person like Trump that could bring that perspective to the table, because he sees it that way. That's why he says things, and he gets criticized for it when he says, like, oh, now that Gaza's flattened, maybe we can build a new Gaza Strip and put hotels there, right? And people thought, oh, this guy sees things. I think actually brilliant. He's looking at it like a project that he would approach in New York City, where he's going after to develop a land deal. And guess who the general contractor is? The United States. Somebody's going to pay us to do this work. He does it really well. He's literally built a whole name around doing it well. So imagine now I think of it as we get him for free and we get the profit, all this money into our treasury, maybe pay down our debt. It really is a win-win for everybody involved. I could see why they may not like it, but the nuance and the new approach is very refreshing from my perspective.
Yeah. It's definitely a big shift. I think that's what is,
and
for
culture
some
shock.
people, it's like, culture shock. So anything else that you would like to share with our audience, or that you think people should know about your show or radio in general?
Yeah, only just, I appreciate the time that we had today. I really, I enjoy your partnership, your friendship, your support for the program. And I love what you do. I love that you're a United States company and that you're putting these radios together. The stuff that C. Crane does, I think is very unique. You may have competitors, not many, because it's a unique product that you make. And last night, I don't know if you were listening, last night being Friday, If I could find the clip, I'll ask the producers to send it to you. But I think you'd appreciate it. A guy called in after we did an announcement for C. Crane, and he said, "I've been listening to radio 40 years." And he said, about 30 years ago, 35 years ago, Rush Limbaugh used to read ads for C. Crane radios. And he said, and I bought. He said, and I have two or three, and I still have them, and they still work, and they're great. And he did the best ad, in my opinion. Nobody knew him, but it was so real. And he was like, let me tell you, you do a good show. And let me tell you about C. Crane radios. And he just went in. And I thought it was great for me because it was like, this could have went the other way, right? Imagine he
Right.
calls it, I bought a secret. What a ripoff. These people, bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
It was nothing like that. And when you hear an old timer tell you, look, I've been listening to this stuff for a long time. A, you're good at this. And B, this is a good product. It was a shot in the arm for me. It was like, oh, good. We're doing something good
It was
here.
a
And
shot in the
hopefully,
arm for us too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy about that. And that's really what I want to do. The last thing I want to do is have somebody say, I went to your jewelry store and, they ripped me off, or, my diamond doesn't shine anymore. I aim to please here. I want to make sure we're doing the right thing, that we're only putting our name and our brand and this big audience, but behind something that matters. And I think C. Crane is where it's at when it comes to innovative radio. So thank you for that.
Very much appreciate that. Thank you for your time today. I hope that you have a great evening and a great, what do you say, early dinner tomorrow?
Yeah. The Lincoln dinner.
The Lincoln dinner. Yeah, I'm
I'm
sure
looking
you'll have some
forward to it.
posts about it.
Yeah, I will. Hopefully, it's like a reunion. It's like you get to see a lot of old friends. So hopefully, I'll see a lot of good people, and we'll put that stuff out there for sure.
It was nice to
Thanks,
have you
Jessica.
on.
Likewise. Thank you.